Revenge office stories. She said my raise was stuck in legal, so I subpoenaed her into career oblivion. That's the title of the story, but it's told from the manager's point of view. My point of view. I'm the one who said it. I thought telling my 40-year-old subordinate her raise was stuck in legal was just a standard corporate fib. I never, ever imagined she'd retaliate with a legal strategy that would not only prove I lied but would systematically dismantle my entire career. Here's how it all went down. I thought of myself as a virtuoso of the corporate orchestra. My title was Director of Strategic Operations, which is a fancy way of saying I made the tough calls that kept the company's gears turning smoothly and, more importantly, profitably. I had the corner office with the panoramic city view, a testament to my 15-year climb. I wasn't just a manager. I was a sculptor of workforce dynamics. I knew the unwritten rules, the currents of power, and I knew when to deploy the most effective tool in any manager's kit: strategic ambiguity. My department was a pressure cooker. Budgets were always tight and expectations were always high. I managed a team of 20, a mix of ambitious young guns and seasoned vets. And among those vets was Sarah. Sarah was reliable. That was always the word. 40 years old, with a quiet competence that was both a blessing and a curse. A blessing because her work was flawless. She was the department's institutional memory. Her reports were immaculate. She never missed a deadline, and she never caused a whisper of drama. But her reliability was also a curse, at least from my point of view. She wasn't a squeaky wheel. She was the silent, smooth-running cog you take for granted until it breaks. She never angled for promotion, never schmoozed at company mixers, never played the political game. She came in, did exemplary work, and went home. In our company's cutthroat ecosystem, that made her practically invisible. She was furniture. Very expensive, high-quality furniture, but furniture all the same. You don't notice a good chair until it's gone. I never imagined Sarah could be anything but that chair. The end of the fiscal year was my Super Bowl. A storm of performance reviews, budget fights, and the delicate dance of handing out raises. This year, the word from on high was austerity. We'd missed our quarterly projections, and leadership was squeezing every department dry. My budget for raises was slashed by 40%. This meant I had to make some deeply unpopular choices. The flashy players, the ones who had the ear of my own bosses, had to be rewarded. They were the future leaders, and their loyalty was a strategic asset. That left very little for the quiet workhorses. That left very little for Sarah. Her review was, as always, glowing. Exceeds expectations across the board. The metrics didn't lie. She had single-handedly streamlined a workflow that saved the department around 200 man-hours a month. In a just world, she would have gotten the biggest raise on the team. But our corporation wasn't a just world. It was a food chain, and I was in charge of feeding the sharks, not the quiet groupers at the bottom. So I gave the lion's share of the cash to my 2-star players, Mark and Jessica, a pair of slick MBAs who were masters of self-promotion. I gave token bumps to a few others to prevent a mutiny. For Sarah, the well was dry. Nothing. Not a single %. I knew it was wrong. I knew it was a betrayal of her dedication. But in my head, it was a calculated, necessary evil. A strategic sacrifice. I told myself I'd make it up to her next year. The problem was, how do you tell your most consistent high performer she's getting a 0% raise without her quitting or running to HR? If she left, the whole department's efficiency would tank. I needed her to stay. I needed to manage her disappointment. I needed to deploy some of that strategic ambiguity. The day I scheduled our meeting, I felt a knot of something I hadn't felt in years: apprehension. I prided myself on my detachment, my ability to handle tough conversations with a surgeon's cool precision. But this was different. I was about to tell a woman who gave her all that her all was worth exactly nothing. Sarah walked into my office right on time as always. She sat in the chair across from my big oak desk, hands folded neatly in her lap. She had a calm, almost serene look on her face. No visible expectations, just a quiet readiness. "Sarah," I started, leaning in to create an air of partnership. "Thanks for coming in. As you know, I've been going through the reviews, and once again, your performance was nothing short of stellar. That workflow project you led, a total game changer for us." A small, polite smile touched her lips. "Thank you. I was happy with how it turned out." "As you should be," I said, my voice smooth as silk. "Your dedication is a cornerstone of this team. And that brings me to compensation. I went to bat for you, Sarah. I pushed hard. I made it crystal clear to the higher-ups that your contributions were exceptional." I paused, letting the weight of my supposed advocacy hang in the air. This was a classic move. Frame yourself as the champion, fighting for your subordinate against the faceless, stingy executives. It creates a you and me against the world vibe. She just watched me, her expression totally unreadable. "Unfortunately," I sighed, adopting a tone of weary frustration, "we're facing some serious budgetary headwinds. Last quarter's numbers weren't great, and they've tightened the purse strings across the board. It's been a battle." I leaned back, steepling my fingers. This was the moment. The delivery had to be perfect, casual, a little annoyed. Like this bureaucratic mess frustrated me just as much as it would her. "So, while I have your raise approved in principle," I said, choosing my words with care, "the final sign-off has been delayed. The paperwork is, for lack of a better term, stuck in legal." For words. Stuck in legal. It was the perfect corporate lie, brilliant in its simplicity and its impenetrability. Who was she going to call? The legal department. They were a fortress of billable hours and cryptic jargon. No mid-level employee would dare. The phrase conjured images of lawyers poring over fine print and complex compliance checks. It wasn't a no. It was a not yet. And not yet can last forever. I watched her, waiting for a flicker of disappointment or a flash of anger. Nothing. Her calm was unnerving. She just blinked slowly. "Stuck in legal," she repeated, her voice perfectly even. "I see. Is there a specific issue they're reviewing?" A direct question. Unexpected. I had to parry. "You know how they are," I said with a dismissive wave. "It's all part of this new compensation review protocol. They're dotting every I and crossing every T on all non-standard increases. Because your performance was so far above average, it got flagged for an additional review. It's a procedural bottleneck. Honestly, it's a pain for me too, but my hands are tied." It was a masterpiece of improvisation, a lie built on a lie, layered with just enough corporate speak to sound real. Sarah was silent for a long moment. She glanced down at her folded hands, then back up at me. Her eyes, which I'd always seen as placid, now held a sharp, analytical glint I'd never noticed before. "I understand," she said finally. Her voice was still quiet, but had a strange new firmness. "Procedural bottlenecks can be difficult. Thank you for letting me know. Is there a timeline for when legal might complete their review?" "Hard to say," I replied quickly, eager to end this. "Could be a week, could be a month. The second I hear anything, you'll be the first to know." "I'd appreciate that," she said, rising from her chair. "Thank you for your time." She turned and walked out, closing the door softly behind her. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I did it. Sarah had bought it. She would wait, and eventually life would go on. I had managed the situation, protected my budget, and kept my best employee in her place. Leaning back, I looked out at the skyline, feeling a surge of satisfaction. I saw myself not as a liar, but as a pragmatist, a survivor. I had no idea that I hadn't just managed a situation. I had just lit the fuse on a bomb sitting directly under my career. And the quiet, unassuming woman who had just walked out of my office was holding the detonator. The days after the meeting bled into weeks, and things in the department returned to normal. Mark and Jessica were insufferably pleased with their raises, preening around the office like prize peacocks. The others were content enough. And Sarah was silent, but it was a new kind of silence. Not the comfortable, background quiet of a happy employee, but an active, charged silence. Her work was still perfect. Her reports were still early. But that quiet warmth she used to have was gone, replaced by a cool, impenetrable professionalism. She was a flawless, efficient, and utterly remote machine. At first, I figured she was just disappointed. It was natural. She was sulking. I gave it a week, then stopped by her desk for a casual check-in. "Hey, Sarah, just wanted to see how you're doing," I said, leaning against her cubicle wall. She looked up, her eyes neutral. "I'm fine, thank you. Working on the quarterly logistics analysis." Great. Listen." I lowered my voice conspiratorially. "I pinged legal again this morning. Still no update. It's a black hole over there. Incredibly frustrating. But I'm staying on them." Another lie, of course. I hadn't contacted anyone. She just nodded. "I appreciate the update." Then she turned right back to her spreadsheet. Conversation over. Her lack of engagement was unsettling. I'd expected questions, frustration, maybe even some tears I'd have to manage. This was different. It felt like she'd accepted my lie not as the truth, but as a line drawn in the sand. And she had simply chosen her side. Weeks turned into a month. My confidence grew. The stuck-in-legal gambit was a success. I even bragged about it, subtly, to another director over drinks. "Had a tough one with a senior analyst," I said, swirling the ice in my glass. "Top performer, budget was dry. Had to get creative with the explanation. Kicked the can down the road. Sometimes you just have to manage the narrative." My friend nodded. He got it. It was the cynical shorthand of middle management. Meanwhile, I noticed small changes in Sarah's routine. She started coming in earlier and leaving later. I saw her at the printer more, printing long, dense documents. Once, I walked past her desk and saw a book peeking from her bag. Something about employee rights and retaliation. A cold prickle of unease hit me, but I brushed it off. She was probably just curious, trying to understand the process I described. Good for her, I thought. A little self-education. Her silence was the defining feature of that time. She never mentioned the raise again. Not once. She didn't ask for updates or send follow-up emails. In team meetings, her status reports were concise, factual, and totally devoid of personality. She was a ghost in the machine. My own arrogance led me to a fatal mistake. I saw her silence as submission. I thought she'd recognized her powerlessness and had just resigned herself to her fate. I thought the quiet was the sound of her spirit breaking. I was a fool. It wasn't the silence of surrender. It was the silence of a predator stalking its prey. It was the quiet focus of a demolition expert planting charges. She wasn't sulking, she was preparing. She wasn't beaten, she was gathering evidence. She was giving me rope, and I was eagerly wrapping it around my own neck, proud of the intricate knot I was tying. I never once thought to look up and see who was building the gallows. By the end of the second month, I'd almost forgotten the whole thing. The lie was a distant, successful memory. That's when the process server walked into my office. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was on a conference call, pacing my office. My assistant buzzed me. "There's a gentleman here to see you," she said, her voice confused. "He doesn't have an appointment." "I'm on a call." "Tell him to schedule one," I snapped. "He says it's a legal matter and will only take a moment," she replied, a nervous edge in her voice. Legal matter. A jolt went through me. "Fine," I sighed, ending my call. "Send him in." The man who entered wasn't a lawyer. He was in a polo shirt and khakis, holding a large manila envelope. He looked bored. "Are you my name?" he asked flatly. "I am. Can I help you?" He didn't answer. He just held out the envelope. "You've been served," he said. I stared at him. Served? Served with what? This has to be a mistake. No mistake, he said, pulling out a logbook. Sign here, please. My hand trembled as I signed. I sank into my chair and tore the envelope open. The document inside was thick, official, and the words at the top made my blood run cold. Notice of civil lawsuit and summons. I scanned the text. The plaintiff was Sarah. She had filed a lawsuit against the company and against me personally for retaliation and age discrimination. It was impossible. Quiet, meek Sarah. But the seal of a well-known employment law firm was at the bottom. This was very real. Attached to the summons was a subpoena dutes tecum. It was a legal order, compelling me to produce documents for the lawsuit. It was brutally specific. It demanded any and all communications, including emails, chat logs, and meeting notes, pertaining to the salary, compensation, or raise of employee Sarah last name. It demanded all documentation related to the departmental budget for salary increases, including allocation records and final approvals. And then the kill shot, any and all communications with the corporate legal department regarding a review of Sarah, last name, as approved raise. My lie. My perfect, simple lie. She was calling my bluff on an epic scale. This wasn't an HR complaint. A lawsuit meant she had a lawyer. She had initiated a formal legal process that had just landed on my desk with explosive force. This changed the entire game. The lie wasn't just a lie anymore. It was now potential evidence of pretext in a discrimination and retaliation case. Panic, then damage control. I snatched my phone and called my boss, the VP. We have a problem, I said, my voice strained. A big one. 10 minutes later, I was in a conference room with 2 corporate litigators. These weren't the friendly lawyers who advise on contracts. They were the janitors who clean up messes like me. I explained the situation, downplaying my lie as a miscommunication. One of the lawyers, Maria, looked at me with zero sympathy. Let me be clear, she said. You told an employee her raise was being held up by this department. She gestured between herself and her colleague. I may have implied that, yes, I stammered. Did you ever submit a request for a review of her raise to us? She asked. No, but... So you lied, she stated as a fact. You used the legal department as a shield for a budget decision. A lie that can now be used as evidence of pretext for retaliation. Your placation tactic has opened this company to a very expensive and very embarrassing lawsuit. The other lawyer chimed in. We have to comply with the subpoena. We have to turn over everything. So, I'll ask you one more time. Are there any emails, any chats, where you admit to anyone that the stuck-in legal story was fake? I thought of the casual, arrogant message to my director friend. I thought of my own emails. I don't think so, I said, but my confidence was gone. I was no longer the master of the game. The paper bomb had detonated, and the fallout was just beginning. The weeks that followed were a slow-motion demolition of my career. My life, once a series of strategic wins, was now a gauntlet of legal procedures I couldn't control. The company lawyers now treated me with thinly veiled contempt. I was a liability. First came discovery, a forensic IT team, sent by our own legal department, swept through my digital life. They imaged my computer and took my company phone. They had access to every email, every chat log, every draft document for the past year. It was a digital strip search. I had to sit in my office pretending to work, knowing strangers were picking through my private conversations and arrogant boasts. I'd see Sarah in the hallways, and she looked unchanged. That was the most infuriating part. No hint of triumph, no smug satisfaction. She'd give me a polite, neutral nod, the same one she'd give the janitor. It was like she had simply outsourced her revenge and was now just a disinterested observer to the fallout. Then came the deposition. This wasn't a corporate meeting. It was a formal legal proceeding in her attorney's sterile offices. On one side was Sarah's lawyer, a guy with a deceptively friendly face and eyes like a hawk, Sarah herself, and a court reporter. On my side were the company lawyers, their faces grim. They were there to protect the company, not me. Sarah's lawyer started gently, asking about my role and the review process. I started to relax. Then he leaned forward. "Ms. My name, on date of our meeting, you informed my client her raise was held up by a procedural review in your legal department, correct?" I informed her it was delayed by a review, yes. "A review in the legal department," he said, nodding. He then slid a piece of paper across the table. It was an email from me to our IT department, dated 2 days before my meeting with Sarah. The subject: urgent, departmental printer issue. The body of the email was me complaining about the color printer jamming again. I stared at it, confused. "What is this?" The lawyer smiled faintly. "This, Ms. My name, is the only email you sent to any support department, including legal, in the week leading up to your meeting with my client. A week where you claim you were going to bat for her. The only battle you were fighting, it seems, was with a faulty printer." The company lawyer next to me stiffened. "We have a complete record of your communications," he continued. "Let me save us some time. You never contacted the legal department about Sarah's raise, did you?" My mouth was dry. It was a verbal conversation. He raised an eyebrow. "With whom?" I scrambled, my mind racing. I couldn't name anyone. They'd be deposed and expose the lie. I don't recall the specific individual." "You don't recall," he said, his voice dripping with disbelief. "You're a director of strategic operations, praised for your attention to detail, but you can't recall the name of the lawyer you had a crucial, raise-delaying conversation with just a few months ago?" He let the question hang in the suffocating silence. I looked at Maria, the company lawyer. Her expression was granite. I looked at Sarah. For the first time, I saw something in her eyes. It wasn't anger. It was pity. That was so much worse. He produced another document, a sworn affidavit from the head of our corporate legal department. It stated in no uncertain terms that no request concerning Sarah's compensation had ever been submitted and that no such procedural review existed. It was a legal checkmate. My lie wasn't just exposed. It was documented, notarized, and weaponized as the central pillar of a retaliation lawsuit. The deposition was over. My credibility was shattered. I had perjured myself and been immediately proven a liar. The social fallout at work was immediate. People who used to greet me warmly now found the floor fascinating when I walked by. I was dropped from email chains. My own team started CCNG my boss on everything. I was being cut out of the herd. My authority, so carefully cultivated over 15 years, evaporated in days. The end came with a sterile calendar invitation. Subject: meeting. Attendees: my boss and the head of HR. No agenda needed. I spent the morning in a fog, packing my personal things into a cardboard box. My favorite mug, a family photo, a small plant Sarah had given me years ago in a team holiday exchange. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. I threw the plant in the trash. In the conference room, they were already seated. The HR head did the talking, not looking me in the eye. "As you know," he began, reading from a script, "the company was recently involved in a legal matter. During the investigation, it came to light that you had willfully misrepresented a situation to an employee. Furthermore, your testimony during the deposition was found to be inconsistent with the documented facts." His words were sanitized and devastating. I wasn't being fired for lying. I was being terminated for willful misrepresentation and providing inconsistent testimony. A dishonorable discharge. This constitutes a serious breach of the company's code of conduct and has exposed the company to significant legal and financial risk, he continued. As a result, we're terminating your employment, effective immediately. That was it. 15 years gone. They slid a severance package across the table, a gag order, a small sum in exchange for my silence. As I signed, I asked the one question that haunted me. What happened with Sarah? The HR head shifted. The company has reached a settlement with her. The terms are confidential. Of course they were. A confidential settlement meant she got her raise, retroactively with damages and all her legal fees paid. She hadn't just won. She had taken the company to the cleaners, and my lie was the key she used to open the vault. The walk out of the building was a blur. My security badge was already dead. In the weeks that followed, the true meaning of career oblivion became clear. Our industry is small. Word travels fast. When recruiters called, the conversations were great until they asked why I left my last job. I'd give the sanitized "we parted ways" line, but they always found out. And then the recruiters' calls would just stop. My name was toxic. My 15 years of experience, my entire track record, was rendered worthless by a single, catastrophic failure of judgment. I had built a career on my reputation as a shrewd operator. Sarah, with one perfectly executed legal maneuver, replaced it with a new one. I was a liar, untrustworthy, a liability. I often wonder what would have happened if I had just been honest. If I had told her the truth about the budget and treated her with the respect she'd earned. But I didn't. I chose the lie, and in the end, that lie cost me everything. This story is a brutal lesson in cause and effect. If you've ever faced a situation like this, or have a story of your own, drop it in the comments. I'm curious to see how many of us have seen the quiet ones finally decide to get loud. And while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about when the corporate game gets a little too real. I thought I was the master of a complex chess game, moving my pieces with strategic brilliance. I saw Sarah as a pawn, an expendable piece to be sacrificed for the good of my own position. But I was dead wrong. She wasn't a pawn. She was the player on the other side of the board. And when I made my move, she just flipped the whole table over.